A familiar rhythm has echoed through Kenya's political corridors. Ruto must go, Kasongo, Ruto Wantam. But pause for a moment, why do these chants sound so familiar? Because the last time Kenya heard such fury, the target was Daniel Arap Moi, a Kalenjin president, just like William Ruto. When Mwai Kibaki ruled, there were no such thunderous chants. When Uhuru Kenyatta governed, none either, even though corruption, police brutality, and the cost of living were arguably far worse. It's almost poetic, and painfully ironic, that the loudest chants of Ruto must go, Kasongo, and Ruto Wantam are rising not from collapsing macroeconomics, but from collapsing political egos. Back in the 1990s, one could understand the fury against Moi. Inflation was suffocating, the shilling was bleeding, and IMF blacklists were Kenya's second currency. But today, William Ruto is actually outperforming both Mwai Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta on a broad range of economic fundamentals, at the exact same stage of their presidencies. For context, a video comparing Kenya's macroeconomic performance under Ruto, Uhuru, and Kibaki in their first 2 years will follow at the end of this video. Inflation is trending downwards. Exports and tax revenues are climbing. The fiscal deficit is tightening. Even the shilling has stabilized under market correction, and GDP growth is holding firm in a global slowdown. Yet the Wantam choirmasters never touch those numbers. They prefer slogans to statistics, noise to nuance. Ruto has challenged them repeatedly to debate on inflation, exports, fiscal stability, GDP, and debt. But they simply change the tune, from economics to emotion. The tragedy is that millions of Kenyans are being seduced into believing that chanting Wantam is a silver bullet that can magically lower prices, expand jobs, and fix public debt. It won't, but makes for a great theater, and perhaps that's the real motive. If you haven't subscribed to Kenya 2027 Watch, please consider doing so right away, and hit the like button to let this video circulate to a much wider Kenyan audience. This is a channel like no other. We have lots of Kenya 2027 political analyses loading for you, and you don't want to miss any of it. And so we must ask, are these Ruto Wantam chants genuine cries for justice, or just some ethnic entitlement echo dressed up as moral outrage? The lead choirmaster of this orchestra is none other than Rigathi Gachagua, who only acknowledges one president, Mwai Kibaki, from his Nyeri county. Perhaps what Gachagua truly wants is a resurrection of the Kibaki era that he misses. Yet for the benefit of Kenya's younger generation, the Kibaki era isn't a golden age. It's the era exposed by whistleblower John Githongo and chronicled by Michaela Wrong in the book, It's Our Turn to Eat. In a critical praise, Newsweek International described the book, It's Our Turn to Eat, as a tumultuous journey through the official networks of sleaze that drained billions from Kenya's coffers. The extent of the fraud and the level of destruction is shocking. The Economist talked about a gripping saga, a down-to-earth yet sophisticated expose, a devastating account of how corruption and tribalism reinforce each other. Billions stolen, tenders rigged, cronies enriched, all while Kibaki's government smiled for the cameras. So before we canonize Gachagua as a saint of integrity, often calling others traitors, betrayers, or projects, let's open his own file. And what we'll find inside isn't a hymn book, it's a charge sheet. Every time Rigathi Gachagua grabs a microphone to lecture the nation about corruption, chanting Kasongo Wantam like a choirmaster, you'd think you were listening to the moral policeman of Kenya, but peel back the choir robe and what you find is a labyrinth of unanswered questions, frozen accounts, vanished billions, and a career that began with the pungent smell of stolen relief food. The story begins in Laikipia. Parliamentary records, Hansard, October 2024, show a letter from the 1990s when Gachagua served as district officer in Ngarua division of Laikipia district. That letter ordered his summary dismissal for gross misconduct and mismanagement of relief food. He denies it. But the record stands. His public service career ended not in honor, but in scandal. When relief food disappears in famine season, corruption isn't a habit, it's a reflex. Relief food vanished, and so did his integrity. Fast forward 2 decades, as Mathira MP, Rigathi Gachagua's bank accounts began performing miracles, receiving and releasing 12.5 billion shillings through a maze of companies and proxies. In 2020, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations froze several accounts. 2 years later, the High Court found 202 million shillings of that money to be proceeds of corruption, ruling that it came from government agencies with no proof of goods or services supplied. But once he became deputy president, the state conveniently changed its mind. The Court of Appeal reversed the forfeiture following a consent arrangement between Gachagua and his state accusers, and the millions were quietly returned. In Kenya, evidence doesn't die, it just retires when you get promoted. In 2021, prosecutors charged Gachagua and 9 others on 6 counts, including fraudulent acquisition of public property, money laundering, conflict of interest, and conspiracy to defraud, alleging theft of 7.4 billion shillings from Nyeri County government and other national agencies. But, a year later, just after the 2022 election, the case was quietly withdrawn for insufficient evidence. But what changed? The evidence or the politics? Either the evidence died of fear, or justice did. The timing spoke louder than the ruling. Even as these cases evaporated, another question refused to die. Where did Rigathi Gachagua's empire come from? Outspan Hotel, Treetops Lodge, Vapingo, Olive Garden, properties allegedly acquired through shell companies and family proxies. Gachagua insists they are family ventures or bank finance projects. Critics call them money laundering monuments. Assets reportedly worth billions, mysteriously acquired on a public servant's payslip. Every time questions are asked, Gachagua says it's family property, or bank loans, or his late brother's legacy. Apparently in Gachagua's world, brothers leave behind billion-shilling hotels the way normal Kenyans leave behind old bicycles. Either Nyeri breeds investment geniuses, or corruption found its perfect address. Gachagua's past conduct as deputy president mirrors the kind of governance Kenyans would expect if he ever took full control. A glimpse into what a future government led or controlled by Rigathi Gachagua would look like was visible during his brief and turbulent tenure as Kenya's deputy president. Instead of confronting the urgent crisis of inflation and hunger that saw ordinary Kenyans wearing sufurias on their heads during the 2023 cost of living protests, Gachagua immersed himself in vanity projects. Lavish renovation works on official properties tied to his office, the DP official residence in Karen, the Harambee House Annex in Nairobi, and an official Mombasa residence. These extravagant refurbishments, reported to have consumed more money than what was used to put up some of these whole buildings, stood in jarring contrast of the suffering of millions he dismissed as noisy. While citizens choked on taxes and police tear gas, Gachagua bragged publicly about reporting to the office early, to coordinate police operations, a euphemism many interpreted as personally supervising the brutal crackdown on opposition demonstrators. If he prioritized opulence, repression, and self-aggrandizement over economic relief and social justice, then a Gachagua presidency would not herald reform. It would institutionalize state-sponsored waste, contempt for the poor, and personalize power under the banner of order. By October 2024, Parliament had had enough. The National Assembly impeached the deputy president on 11 charges, from money laundering and misappropriation to ethnic incitement and abuse of office. The Senate upheld 5 charges and removed him from office, but curiously acquitted him on corruption. In Kenya, even when corruption stinks to high heaven, politics sprays air freshener. So when Gachagua points a trembling finger and calls anyone corrupt, traitor, project, betrayer, Kenyans should ask, from which moral mountain is he preaching? A man who once had to surrender proceeds of crime, who watched a 7.4 billion shillings case vanish into thin air, who lost his government job over relief food, cannot be the nation's moral guide to integrity. Because if he ever became president, his record suggests not a war on corruption, but a reunion tour for it. If Ruto were to go wantam and Gachagua ever became president, Kenyans wouldn't be escaping corruption, they'd be promoting it. From Saul to Paul, we'd be going straight to Pablo Escobar. Kenyans are completely fed up with dancing around the same political charlatans every election cycle. Kenya does not need more choir masters of hypocrisy, it needs leaders who will bring real change. Rigathi Gachagua is not the solution to corruption, he's exhibit A of how corruption survives. From relief food gone missing, to billions in unexplained wealth, to cases that vanish the moment he gains power, he embodies the very rot he denounces. You cannot wash corruption with corruption, so the next time Gachagua leads the KASONGO and WANTAM chorus, remember, it's not a hymn for justice. It's a rehearsal for a comeback tour to the Kibaki era of Our Turn to Eat that he misses. Gachagua and the people he collaborates with under the united opposition do not represent the kind of change anyone would be looking for after William Ruto. When Gachagua calls anyone out for corruption or betrayal, that's not irony, That's Kenya in rehearsal for a tragedy. In the turbulent year of 2024, when Kenya's streets erupted in defiance against economic pain, police brutality, and political arrogance, one name rose from the roar of the crowd: Kasmuel Makur. From the roar of demonstrators outside Parliament to primetime TV debates on Citizen, NTV, and KTN, his voice cut through the noise with moral clarity and fearless precision. Makur quickly became the face and the conscience of Kenya's Gen Z protest movement, his fiery speeches and uncompromising interviews turning him into the most authoritative and recognizable voice of Kenya's Gen Z revolution, the pulse of a restless generation that finally found its voice, its courage, and its conviction to demand a better Kenya. When others wavered between political expediency and populist posturing, Makur stood unbending, calling out hypocrisy on both sides of the political divide. Makur has recently described the Kenyan opposition as a politically confused, dishonest, and disgraced group, made of men who mistake bitterness for principle and chaos for change. And if that isn't the perfect definition of today's wantam crusaders, then what is? This is Kenya 2027 Watch. Facts, not chance. Truth, not tribal choirs. Like and subscribe for more uncompromising political documentaries. We're here on a serious mission to separate the facts from the propaganda.